this is the 20 trade examples. 20 trade examples that are perfect trade examples of how we are trading, how price plays out. So we have to just go with the flow of probability. And what I've put at the top is to be fluid with liquidity. So if price is going another direction, we just go with it, okay? It's like a tide. We go with the tide, yeah? So this is an intraday swing strategy. I also do a swing position strategy. Okay, so this is top-down analysis plus my strategy execution. For the trend analysis, it's 4 hour to 1 hour structure. Execution is 1 hour to 15-minute reaction. And that structure is the trend and the structure. And then the reaction is the pressure plus momentum. And then our actual execution is within the institutional zone, which is our key point of interest. So the trend is in red and the execution is in green. So I'm going to create this whole video so that when I want to go over my analyses, I can go over this whole video without having to actually go through anything myself. I can just sit and watch and take notes. So for the counter trend, okay, so we have a market shift to the downside, which means that now that we're trading up from this institutional zone, this is a counter trend trade, yeah. So what we're doing is we're aiming for this imbalance on the 15-minute is the closest recognition of this imbalance we can see. Sometimes it'll be the 1 hour, 4 hour, 15 minutes. So we have to be subjective when it comes to the imbalance and actually look at these obvious supply or demand zones that is around one of these time frames, okay? So we have to be a little bit subjective, but it's always with an objective amongst that subjective price. We're looking at top-down analysis here where 15-minute pressure pushes into 1 hour pressure. So we have this long wick doji at the institutional zone, and we put a close take profit within the internal range because of previous heavy selling pressure. So we're looking at this imbalance, and that's where take profit is. We can see that's where profit was taken, and there was another opportunity to enter on the way up. However, we have changed our strategy a little bit to make sure that we don't actually look at the chart. We just leave price do what it wants to do. However, that's the other opportunities we can take if we miss this original entry. So you can see a loss, consolidation, sweeper liquidity, and price goes up to that take profit. Late, but better late than never. And onto another one, which is the continuation, which is the counter trend, because we're still up on a bullish market structure. However, we're trading still back down within this internal range. So we can see here above the imbalance where price was swept, we have price coming up to sweep more liquidity. We have a failed reaction, price sweeping liquidity, and then we enter after this sweep liquidity on this imbalance. So on the 15-minute was the best entry, the closest entry we can get. And then we're aiming for this order block on the 1 hour. We can see within the internal range, this is the institutional zone. We see this 1 hour order block. Okay, so what we're doing is we're seeing 4 hour, 1 hour doji. We can see that entry again with that 15-minute as well. So we have that 15-minute plus 1 hour pressure pushing into 4 hour confirmation. And then we want to take profit at the internal range 1 hour order block with imbalance. Okay. And the reason we're exiting at this institutional zone is because of this 3 white soldiers moving up. That's the pattern that is indicative of the institutional zone. Okay, and this is the lower high scaling opportunity where price came up to sweep some liquidity, tap into this sort of supply zone, lower time frame supply zone, and then price came back down to our point of interest. That was the second opportunity if we miss this first one. We don't want to be missing these first ones, but these are basically to just make me not worry if I miss opportunities, and I can go over these other options just to calm myself down and realize that there are other opportunities. Okay, and now we're going on to a pro trend because we're following this market shift to the upside. and we've got this higher low confirmation right here, where this institutional zone that we were previously aiming for within the internal range had been mitigated. And we see this with, it's quite a difficult notice actually. However, we're looking at this institutional zone as opposed to price action precisely. Okay, so we're following the structure. We're not just following price action, we're following the structure of price from our key point of interest, which is the institutional zones, where large money is just entering with the structure because that's the lowest that they can enter without screwing up the order flow and making the most out of the price that price is at, so that they can flow with the money at the most profit they can gain. So we want to look at their entries. That's why price action is a little screwed up. And we see a small buying pressure entry here, and that pushed into that 1 hour pressure. So we see 15-minute plus 1 hour pressure pushing into 4 hour indecision. And our next take profit target is this order block from above where this imbalance is. So it's going to test that and then continue checking the range before it actually breaks out of this range. We're aiming for, we've got 15-minute plus 1 hour pressure pushing into that 4 hour indecision. But we have that market shift pushing up, that's why our incentive is bullish. Aim for the internal range order block with imbalance, okay? These are the high-low scaling opportunities. This is the result, and we see price came down, we see these indecision, more sweeps of liquidity, giving us reason to enter. So that's really what we want to see. We want to see a sweep of liquidity and price going in our favor, and then we can enter with the trend. Alright, so counter trend. This is where price has gone all the way up to this order block. We can see the market shift above, so we're still within this range. And we see there is an institutional zone right here where that order block is. And we see it was where there was like just hella pressure coming from here. So to enter from this order block, we're seeing this 15 minutes and 1 hour pressure pushing into that 4 hour pressure. Okay, so we're looking at that 15 minutes for a better opportunity from that order block with the imbalance. We see it's just sweeping more liquidity entering into this zone, which is an institutional zone, pulling back into this other institutional zone. So our 15-minute plus 1 hour pressure pushing into 4 hour pressure, and our take profit is at the internal range 1 hour order block below the breaker structure. So this is the institutional zone. This is where we're aiming for, and this is where we'll want to enter again to continue up with the trend. You see here, these are the lower high opportunities where price was slowing down, and we could have entered with some bearish pressure stepping in to put a stop loss above. Price immediately dropped and didn't go all the way, but we see that there's selling pressure and reason to enter into another trade, which may not be such a good entry, but there is another entry just in case we want to make some money before we flip the script and go the other way. Alright, so now we're looking at a pro trend. We've only got 2 time frames here because the 15-minute didn't show any clear reason to enter. So we have this order block that we marked where there's 1 hour indecision pushing into that 4 hour pressure, and we still have that institutional zone. It's a resistance now where it's testing the rejection that happened before, but we still have that market shift showing that there's bullish incentive. So we have that 1 hour indecision pushing into that 4 hour pressure, and our take profit is at the high of the internal range. So this is the resistance now. A high low scaling opportunity right here where there's a sweep of liquidity. We see that sweep of liquidity coming in, and then there's a reason to buy when we see pressure coming up. Obviously there's hella pressure, so we would have been late if we're trying to go with a stop loss. I don't even want to calculate that, like 0.25 risk to reward or some shit. So moving forward is that we have a counter trend trade from this institutional zone rejection, where we see that there's some sort of rejection and then price then coming up to sweep a little bit more liquidity before showing a reason to sell, which is this 1 hour selling pressure. However, we have a little reason to entry from the 15-minute. We could wait for that 1 hour extra if we want, but the best entry would have been that 15 minutes going into the 1 hour pressure, pushing into the 4 hour pressure too. We see that selling pressure just coming in, one indecision followed by a bit of a selling pressure wick, and then we can aim back down to this 1 hour institutional zone order block where we see hella pressure coming in. Okay, and what we are looking at is 15 minutes plus 1 hour pressure pushing into 4 hour pressure. Take profit at internal range 1 hour order block below the breaker structure. Okay, so we have that incentive, that bullish incentive. Lower high scaling opportunities. We have a sweep of liquidity, meaning we can enter here after this selling pressure stepped in. We have more selling pressure opportunities. We see this inducement happening because price is moving downwards to this institutional zone, so price is definitely not ready to go up. So this is where people would be buying, and we could sell just above and take it down and look for another entry there if we missed this initial entry. Counter trend, okay, so I think, yeah, I'm not sure if this is the same chart. However, we're just going with these examples and setups just to get that particular activating system on point, even though we may be looking at a different point of time. It's all the same strategy, okay? So here we're looking at a fractal market shift, yeah, and a fractal market shift to the downside. This is a bit strange. We're in a little bit of a Star Trek situation here, where all sorts of gaps going on. But we do have a fractal market shift below the known price point where price previously showed a close. And so we have a bearish incentive where we can now enter at this 1 hour indecision, pushing into this 4 hour selling pressure. And then we're aiming at this demand support where there's a lot of pressure. We could even move this demand support zone lower. However, this is obviously what I've done at the time. I've probably got a bit better since I did this. I made this I did this in December, these back tests. So yeah, I've got some improvement, which I've done since. So 1 hour indecision pushing into the 4 hour selling pressure. And then we're taking profit at the internal range demand support area. Okay, we can see, yeah, price went down further than this oversaturated demand support. We can see there's way too much going on here. We really want a bit more liquidity to be swept. It even went down to here. But yeah, we see these lower high opportunities where price showed that selling pressure. Price came up. This is quite scary, really. But that's where we can try and sell and put a stop loss above where the break even is right now. These second options, these second opportunities. Alright, so pro trend is that we're looking at this demand support area, and we see this 15-minute buying pressure after some buying pressure too. So we see that pressure is just ready to go upwards, and what we're doing is we're aiming for the high, the known high that we're going for, recent high. So we are aiming for the take profit at the high of the range, and the 15-minute plus the 1 hour pressure pushing in to this 4 hour pressure. Okay, so the 15-minute was the best option. We do have some hella selling pressure, but if we know institutional zones well enough, like here with the demand support, sweeping liquidity, the pressure is quite indifferent. It doesn't show the clean, it just isn't ready to go down, though it tries to show a sort of distribution that isn't actually ready. The manipulation is ready to step back in. And higher low scaling opportunities is right here. We see these sweeps of liquidity before we have those buying pressures. There's an entry here, we have another sweep of liquidity here where we can enter, and so those are entry points if we miss this first one. So these are things to take note of, just to keep ourselves focused and sane in case of situations like that. And we have a counter trend where we've taken the high, and we see there's the 15-minute inducements, selling pressure, sweeping more pressure above, and then giving reason to sell. There's a selling wick, and so we have that 15-minute plus 1 hour indecision going into that 4-hour heavy pressure going back down. So we have that high, which is where the zone, the point of interest is. And we have the take profit at the internal range, 15-minute, 1 hour demand zone. So we have this demand zone right here, and then we have this lower time frame sweep of liquidity demand support area where we're aiming for. That's the next institutional zone. This is manipulation, so we're seeing that we want an actual order flow to be mitigated to continue up. There's just still imbalance below it. And lower high scale in opportunities. We have sweeps liquidity just above coming up to create a lower high, and then we have another one lower high here. So this is just opportunities in case we miss the first opportunity. Pro trend, okay, so with the demand support 15-minute demand institutional zone getting mitigated, we see that it's been showing some buying pressure coming in from this zone. So we have that 15-minute plus the 1 hour pressure pushing into the 4 hour. Okay, we have this break of structure which is giving us that bullish incentive. Yeah, so the take profit is at the next key point of interest, which is the supply order block. So we see that 15-minute pushing up, ready, pushing with that 1 hour. And the higher low scaling opportunities is we have those sweeps of liquidity which come down, boom, reason to enter. We see the sweep of liquidity, indecision, some bullish pressure is ready. It doesn't even matter about the pattern being so confirmed because it just follows up that momentum that isn't even dependent on this like perfect pattern. There are patterns, but they're just not perfect. Okay, you will get those perfect patterns at these zones. However, it is so rare, and we just want to follow the order flow of price and follow these institutional zones, like making new structure. That's really where these trends are bred. Okay, and we have these sweep of liquidity for another high low, and there's our reasons to enter in case we miss this initial entry. Patience is key. Now here we have the counter trend trade from this supply order block institutional zone. And what we have on the lower time frame is we have this inducement setting up where price is not ready to turn down yet. Then price comes up, sweeps this liquidity, gives us this indecision doji. Yeah. And then we are selling down into this demand support. It's actually an order block area where we are looking to take profit with the order flow. Okay, so we have that 15-minute pushing into the 4 hour, so the 1 hour isn't even ready, and we have that 4 hour just giving clear reason to sell afterwards. So we have to be very just with the order flow and with the institutional zone, looking at these key points of interest as opposed to the price action as much. So we have the take profit at the internal range 1 hour order block with imbalance. This is the 1 hour order block. I've written it as a demand supply area, and it is a bit of a demand supply from down here, but it may be easier to notice it as a 1 hour order block. Okay, scale in opportunity where price gave a sweep of liquidity and just swept a little bit more, so we wanted to maybe move it a bit more space, and price came down to, there's obviously a demand support area below, but we're looking at this 1 hour order block where price has just gone into. Second opportunity late, but that's an opportunity. And then from this zone we have a massive trade which is pro trend going to the next key point of interest. So we have this demand support or 1 hour order block, which is where this institutional zone is. We have the 15-minute buying pressure in indecision, and so we have that 15-minute plus the 1 hour pressure really pushed into that 1 hour pressure afterwards, and it's going straight to the supply order block on a higher time frame and going with the trend. So these trades are really taking out a lot of liquidity and imbalance. So 15-minute into plus 1 hour pressure pushing into 4 hour pressure. So we see that. Take profit at the next key point of interest. Pro-trend. These are high-low scaling opportunities where we see little sweeps of liquidity where we can enter. High-low, another little entry here at the very end. Now for this next supply order block entry, we can see that on a lower time frame, there's maybe the 1 hour order block as opposed to this bigger, higher time frame order block where we see a little bit of liquidity swept, and then we get these indecision dojis, and that's where we can enter, especially after we see this selling pressure coming in afterwards. So we have fractal market shift, and then price comes up to test these highs. I actually remember trading this and I was on the wrong side of the market. So we've come a long way to actually start seeing this stuff a lot better and actually getting in tune with the market, making sure that we don't get manipulated by analysis paralysis and all sorts of just unregulated thinking when it comes to price action and momentum. Okay, so what we have is a fractal market shift from this institutional zone, and then we see price coming back up after the lows get absolutely taken out, they get closed on. That's what the fractal market shift is. Then price comes up and we can enter when we see this indecision following. And then from here, we have that fractal market shift plus 1 hour indecision pushing into 4 hour confirmation. And we're aiming at this institutional zone where we have this 15-minute order block, in fact. Okay, so this is where the imbalance is. As opposed to any 1 hour small zone, we're looking at this 15 minutes priority because it always mitigates some point of interest, especially with these currencies. In commodities, you have fair value gaps which get taken out a lot more because price is just a lot heavier. However, with currencies, especially the Japanese yen, I've noticed that they actually go for the blocks as opposed to gaps. Okay, it's more attuned with support and resistance. That's what I've noticed from day one. So the fractal market shift with the 1 hour indecision pushing into the 4 hour confirmation. Take profit at / below the break of structure imbalance. So we have that break of structure right here, and that's where the imbalance is. Okay, so that's where the 15-minute break of structure is. 15-minute order block even. 4 hour 3 white balls. Lower high. Scaling opportunity. Quite difficult to see. It does this strange trend line going upwards, but we see that there is another opportunity to enter. Pro trend. So we're now continuing with the trend. As price comes down, we can see a bit more clearly where price swept liquidity, gave this strange indecisive confirmation with the gap, weekend gap, came up, showed multiple indecision dojis, and then fell afterwards to our key institutional point of interest. From this institutional point of interest, we then see an entry where 15-minute bullish pressure pushes into the 1 hour bullish pressure, which pushes into 4 hour confirmation, and we're continuing with the trend. And our take profit is at the next key point of interest. And our high-low scaling opportunities, we see that there's sweeps of liquidity down here, sweeping this liquidity. There's definitely a big gap, so it's a bit difficult to decide, but that is one opportunity. And then a second opportunity is when price rejects below the point of interest, and on a lower time frame you'd want to get in at this sweep of liquidity before this massive push on the higher time frame. Okay, now pro trend. I think this is so this is after price has fallen, and we've got a pro trend opportunity here where we are looking at this institutional zone and with this breaker structure showing that there's bullish incentive. However, we're we're at an imbalance, so we don't have key reason to continue up, especially with this negative selling pressure. So we're just aiming for the internal highs. So this is really what's happening, is the momentum has done a U-turn. So we're just wanting to test these highs as opposed to going any further up against this momentum. Okay, so take profit is at the high of the internal range of 15 minutes to plus 15-minute pressure from this institutional zone on the 1 hour. Pushing into the 1 hour pressure, we see that bullish reaction for sure. Pushing into 4-hour indecision, you see right here. So this is the exit. I don't see another point to enter. Maybe a lower time frame, there could be another point near the entry, but we can see that internal high got swept. And then from this internal high, we see an entry with a lower time frame indecision after selling pressure from the internal high. And then we are aiming down for the order block, this 1 hour unmitigated order block, because we have this break of structure which hasn't mitigated this order flow going down from this break of structure. So there is bullish incentive, and we're just looking to take profit at this order block. So the 15-minute pressure showing that there's a rejection from this high, showing bearish incentive. 1 hour pressure showing definite bearish incentive into that 4-hour pressure, moving down with the rejection into the bullish order flow mitigation. And we have a lower high scale in opportunity from here, where we have a sweep of liquidity, and then we have another sweep of liquidity here, just to show that there are opportunities to enter and that we don't have to worry too much if we're just really late. You can move stop losses down. You know, there's a lot of points that we can just be safe. Okay, so we see this mitigation from this order block. Now here we also have a market shift. Now we have this higher low which has been taken out, has been closed on. So now this is a market shift, but we still have this order block which is giving us bullish incentive, especially from this break of structure upwards. Okay, so what we're doing is we're now aiming at this 1 hour institutional zone point of interest. It's a big supply zone, and we have this liquidity just above here. So what we're doing is we're now aiming for this, just to see with this incentive if price will go down, but we are predicting price will go down because of this shift in market sentiment. However, price is just coming up to test that high, to create a lower high. Okay, so we have that 15-minute bullish incentive coming down, showing a higher low, plus the 1 hour pressure pushing into that 4-hour indecision. Okay, we have this buying pressure right here. And higher low scaling opportunities, we have price giving a massive gap upwards, showing we have this buying pressure coming in to show that the gap has been filled and there's bullish momentum. Little test to give us another higher low, sweeping a little more liquidity within that range. More higher low sweeps of liquidity that we can enter on. Okay, now we have a pro trend, as we've seen this market shift coming down, and we're now aiming for the next key point of interest. So we have that market shift, price at this area. We have 15-minute rejection, but not definitive. Prices come up, swept liquidity above here. We see on that 4-hour, we see that indecision. It wasn't certain to go against that 4-hour pressure, especially 4-hour. I've noticed it's really important to just not be, don't fuck around with the 4-hour. Okay, like if the 4-hour is really showing pressure, or the 4-hour pressure really shows us what's going on, even if the 1 hour is strong and the 4-hour is not so strong, we can still ride with that 4-hour. But if the 4-hour is strong, son, look at that. Like, there's no way price is going to go down without another lower high sweep of liquidity, and that's exactly what happens here. We have that indecision where the 15-minute plus the 1 hour pressure, where we have that indecision on the 1 hour, pushes into that 4-hour indecision. Okay, And because we have that break of structure, we also have this institutional demand support area. Yeah. So price is, that's our next take profit area. So take profit at the 4 hour demand support below the break of structure within the swing range. Okay. So we're moving, the volatility has definitely increased. We can see this is really moving with order flow and with liquidity imbalance and institutional zones. Okay. So lower high scaling opportunities, we see sweeps of liquidity. Not a great sweep of liquidity here, that's for sure. Comes back up, sweeps a bit more liquidity, even testing to create another opportunity. So sweeping this liquidity. We have just indecision, and then price coming down to the demand support area. Okay, we've got one or two more. We've got a counter trend which goes from this demand support, and we're aiming at this supply order block on the 4 hour. We see this supply zone. Yeah, really, that's where the pivotal area is. Okay, so we have that breaker structure giving us that bullish sort of retest incentive, and this institutional zone. So price showing 1 hour indecision. Okay, so that 15-minute is really not certy. We see this, but the 4 hour is also like showing difficult pressure to go against. So here with no price is not ready to go up fully, but we're looking at this institutional zone, and with this 1 hour indecision, we can buy into this 15-minute from this demand support. It's 1 hour indecision pushing into 4 hour pressure. Yeah. Take profit at the higher time frame order block within the internal range. Okay. Sweeping liquidity. This imbalance right there. Yeah. So this is really against the top-down analysis. This is quite a unique one where it's really difficult to read, and we're looking at this 1 hour indecision for reason to buy into it. Yeah. Right here we see this 1 hour showing buying pressure, coming down to give another higher low, sweeping this liquidity before going all the way up to this supply order block. And then for the last one, we don't actually have the result for this, okay? But we are on this pro trend, and price sweeping this liquidity of that demand support area. Yeah. So price was not ready to go down yet. To go up. Yeah, we saw that with this 4 hour heavy selling pressure. But we also have this break of structure to show that there is bearish incentive. So it's just testing this lower high, so that from this institutional zone, so that we can sweep decisive liquidity from this institutional zone over here on the left side. We have that 15-minute pressure pushing into that 4 hour pressure. The 1 hour is indecisive. So we're really looking at this institutional zone, this imbalance, this order flow, as opposed to price action, so that we can get these entries and roll with the structure, catch these trends, and take profit at this liquidity below the 4 hour demand support zone. Okay, so we don't have a result, but if I remember correctly, price swept this liquidity and then continued upwards to go with the bullish pressure. We'll find this out in the next quarter of our monk mode, and we'll be able to really analyze what's going on. I'll pause this as I watch this over, just so that I can get myself in tune with these analyses. And yeah, man, I delayed this video for some time because I just wanted to make sure I had the result, and I was doing my monk mode, and I've got a lot of business coming up, so this was the perfect day to just go over it. And yeah, man, this is my analysis of the intraday swing strategy, and this is 20 trade examples with my favorite quote of this quarter, this first quarter, which was to be fluid with liquidity. This was the quotes that I got after I blew my last account that I'm going to blow, and I really needed to be understanding that liquidity is something to be fluid with, and not something that is robotic as such. Okay, we are humans, We need to go with the flow and really just understand that everything is to be adapted to and not so rigid in our being. Okay. So one love, keep being bosses, constant, never-ending improvement. You know how it is, and keep being G's. Okay, come on.